The sky over the Persian Gulf did not turn red from the sunrise. It turned red from the death of an era. At 0400 hours, the unthinkable became the inevitable. Jubail, the largest industrial city on the planet and the crown jewel of Saudi Arabia's economic power, was transformed into a landscape of twisted steel and towering infernos. This was not a localized skirmish or a symbolic exchange of fire. This was a clinical, high-intensity decapitation strike against the very concept of regional stability. For decades, the safety of these facilities was guaranteed by the invisible hand of American power and the impenetrable shield of Western technology. Tonight, that shield did not just crack, it disintegrated. To understand the magnitude of what has just occurred, one must look past the smoke and into the cold mechanics of geography and physics. Jubail is not merely a city, it is a global node of industrial gravity. It is the heart of the world's petrochemical supply chain. It sits on the western shore of the Persian Gulf, directly across from the Iranian coast. In the brutal logic of modern missile warfare, distance is the only currency that matters. From the Iranian launch sites near Bushehr to the cooling towers of Jubail, the flight time for a high-speed cruise missile is less than 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That is the window between the detection of a launch and the arrival of a kinetic payload. Within that window, every layer of defense, every command and control loop, and every political calculation must function perfectly. Tonight, they failed. The Iranian strike package was a masterclass in saturation tactics. It was designed to exploit the inherent mathematical weakness of any air defense system. No matter how advanced a Patriot or THAAD battery may be, it is limited by its rate of fire and its inventory of interceptors. The attack began not with missiles, but with a swarm of low-cost, low-altitude suicide drones. These mass-produced UAVs, costing less than a luxury sedan, were sacrificed to overwhelm the Saudi radar arrays. They saturated the sensor grid, forcing the automated systems to prioritize targets that were effectively decoys. Behind the screen of cheap plastic and gasoline engines came the real killers, the Sumar cruise missiles and the Fateh 110 ballistic variants. These weapons did not fly high where they could be easily tracked. They hugged the wave tops of the Gulf, masking their heat signatures and radar cross-sections against the clutter of the sea. By the time the Saudi defense batteries realized the drones were a feint, the kinetic impacts were already occurring. The primary targets were the gas oil separation plants and the critical desalinization infrastructure. This was a strike aimed at the lungs and the blood of the kingdom. Without the separation plants, the oil cannot flow. Without the desalinization plants, the cities cannot survive. Iran did not just hit a factory, they punctured the jugular of the Saudi state. The immediate aftermath reveals a terrifying shift in the regional balance of power. For 40 years, the Middle East has operated under the umbrella of Pax Americana. The deal was simple. The United States provides an ironclad security guarantee in exchange for stable energy markets and regional cooperation. Jubail was the physical manifestation of that deal. But as the fires continue to rage, the silence from Washington is deafening. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, stationed just a few hundred miles away in Bahrain, remained in port. The American response was limited to diplomatic condemnations and the deployment of additional surveillance assets. For the hard realists in Riyadh, the message is clear. The American umbrella has holes, and those holes are large enough for a Fateh 110 to fly through. The failure of deterrence is total. Deterrence only works when the cost of an action is perceived to be higher than the benefit. For years, Iran was deterred by the threat of American intervention, the belief that any strike on Saudi soil would bring the full weight of the U.S. Air Force down on Tehran. But the Iranians have spent the last decade building a fortress of asymmetric capabilities. They have developed a domestic defense industry that does not rely on foreign supply chains. They have created a ring of fire consisting of thousands of hidden launch sites, underground missile cities, and proxy forces capable of striking every U.S. base in the region simultaneously. They have correctly calculated that the United States, weary of forever wars and distracted by the Indo-Pacific, is no longer willing to trade New York for Riyadh. As the fires spread through Jubail's industrial zones, the logic of escalation takes over. This is the most dangerous phase of the crisis. When a nation's primary source of wealth and survival is attacked, the pressure to retaliate is not a matter of pride, it is a matter of sovereign necessity. The Saudi leadership now faces a binary choice, both of which are catastrophic. They can retaliate directly against Iranian soil, striking the refineries at Abadan or the export terminals at Karg Island. But such a move would trigger a full-scale regional war, a war where Saudi Arabia's concentrated infrastructure is far more vulnerable than Iran's decentralized, hardened military complex. The second choice is even more consequential. Riyadh can accept the new reality. They can acknowledge that the era of American protection is over and that they must now negotiate from a position of weakness. This would mean a fundamental realignment of the Middle East. If the House of Saud cannot rely on Washington, they must find a way to live with Tehran. This is the strategic pivot Iran has been working toward for 40 years. By burning Jubail, they have forced the kingdom to realize that geography is destiny. Iran is a permanent neighbor. The United States is a distant and increasingly distracted patron. The impact on the global energy market is already manifesting as a systemic shock. Jubail's petrochemical output is not easily replaced. This isn't just about the price of a gallon of gasoline in Chicago. This is about the precursors for plastics, fertilizers, and medical supplies that sustain the global economy. By knocking these facilities offline, Iran has demonstrated its ability to impose a global tax on every nation that opposes its interests. They have weaponized the supply chain. The world's major powers, including China and India, are now looking at the Persian Gulf not as a stable reservoir, but as a volatile combat zone. They will not wait for the U.S. to fix the problem. They will begin making their own separate deals with whoever holds the smoking gun. Look at the map and you will see the strategic depth that Iran has leveraged. They are playing on their own doorstep, while the United States is operating at the end of a 10,000-mile logistical tether. Every interceptor missile the U.S. sends to the region must be transported via slow-moving cargo ships or expensive airlifts. Every drone Iran launches is built in a factory just a few hours' drive from the front lines. This is the brutal math of attrition. In a prolonged conflict, the side with the shorter supply line and the cheaper ordnance almost always wins. Iran has proven they can scale their aggression faster and more cheaply than the U.S. can scale its defense. This brings us to the point of no return, the collapse of the regional alliance system. Small states like Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE are watching the smoke rise from Jubail with a sense of existential dread. They have spent billions on American hardware, believing it bought them a seat at the table of the great powers. Now they see that their expensive F-35S and Patriot batteries are useless against a massed attack of low-tech drones and high-tech cruise missiles. The gravitational pull of Tehran is increasing. We are witnessing the birth of a new regional order, one where Iranian hard power is the primary currency. In the coming days, the rhetoric will be fierce. There will be emergency sessions at the UN and frantic shuttle diplomacy between world capitals. But the reality on the ground is dictated by the smoking ruins of Jubail. The balance of power has shifted because the perception of power has shifted. You cannot unburn a city. You cannot undemonstrate the failure of a superpower's protection. The Iranians have shown that they are willing to risk everything to shatter the status quo. The Americans have shown that they are no longer willing to risk anything to maintain it. The strategic turn is now complete. The Middle East is no longer a region of American hegemony. It is a contested battleground where the advantage lies with the actor most willing to use raw kinetic force. The vulnerability of Jubail has exposed the vulnerability of the entire global order. If the world's most advanced air defenses cannot protect the world's most important industrial site from a regional power, then no node of the global economy is safe. The rules-based order has been replaced by the range-based order. If you are within range, you are at risk. As we look toward the next phase of this escalation, the focus must remain on the logistics of the response. Does the U.S. have the industrial capacity to replenish the interceptors that were expended in minutes? Does the Saudi military have the depth to sustain a multi-front war while its primary source of income is on fire? The answer to these questions will determine the map of the next decade. History is not made in the halls of diplomacy. It is made in the collision of geography, technology, and the will to use them. The Jubail strike is a signal. It tells us that the period of managed competition is over. We have entered a period of raw power politics where the map is drawn in fire. For the nations of the West, the lesson is bitter. You cannot buy security. You can only build it through the credible threat of overwhelming force. When that threat is tested and found wanting, the entire structure of power collapses. The fires in Jubail are not just burning oil and gas. They are burning the treaties, the alliances, and the assumptions of the last half century. In this new reality, the only thing that matters is the ability to strike, the ability to endure, and the ability to control the escalation ladder. Iran has seized the initiative. They have shown that they control the rhythm of the conflict. They can choose when to strike, where to strike, and how much pain to inflict. The United States and its allies are now in a reactive posture, struggling to catch up to a reality that changed in 7 minutes. This is the definition of a strategic pivot. The video you are watching is not an analysis of a single event. It is a chronicle of the end of Pax Americana in the Middle East. When the history books are written, they will not focus on the political speeches or the peace summits that failed. They will focus on the night the largest industrial city in the world was left defenseless. They will focus on the moment the world realized that the dragon was not just at the gates, it had already burned the throne room. The question is no longer whether there will be a war. The question is how the surviving players will adapt to a world where the old rules no longer apply. As the global economy braces for the shock waves and as the military planners scramble to rewrite their doctrines, one cold, hard fact remains. The map of the Middle East was rewritten tonight. Not by a pen, but by the kinetic energy of a 1,000-pound warhead hitting its mark. The era of certainty is dead. The era of Jubail has begun. The smoke will eventually clear, but the vision of the world will never be the same. Every nation now knows that the high-tech shield is a myth and that the superpower's promise has a shelf life. In the halls of power in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran, the lesson is being studied with clinical precision. They have seen the vulnerability. They have seen the hesitation. And they know that in the game of great power realism, hesitation is an invitation to further aggression. The fire is spreading, and it will not stop until the entire balance of global power has been forged anew in the heat of this conflict. This is the reality of the 21st century. It is cold, it is sharp, and it is written in the blood of the industrial heartland. Watch the horizon, for the next strike is already in flight.